Hey everyone, welcome to the Get Your Life Together Girl Mini Mindset Reset. I'm your host, Danielle Van. As a cognitive behavioral therapist, a life coach to women, and author, one thing has become abundantly clear. So much of what gets in our way in our daily lives is not only how we think, but what we think, our mindset. Because of that, every other week, I'm taking your requests and questions and handing over quick, easy to use, practical strategies and life tools to help you shift your thinking, create calm, help you understand and express your emotions, harness your inner power, and learn how to navigate your personal story in 15 minutes or less. After all, how else can you get your life together? So let's shift your perspective with the tools and conversations that help you in the throes of change. The Get Your Life Together Girl podcast mini mindset reset starts right now. At one point or another, all of us have been angry. Today's mindset reset centers around a question that I received about repressed anger, what it is, some of the signs and the symptoms, and how to deal with it. Of course, in this time frame, we only have 15 minutes from start to finish, so it is going to be a very quick conversation. Anytime that anger is present, remember that working with a licensed professional who is trauma trained is always the best way to go, because repressed anger is one of the hardest emotions to deal with. It really is something that hides itself in the subconscious. When it does resurface, it often looks like passive aggressiveness, sarcasm, fatigue, depression. It's deep-seated, it's long-lasting, it wreaks havoc in your daily lives and your emotional health. It's one of the nastiest emotions that you can deal with, like I said. Let's first talk about some signs and symptoms of what repressed anger looks and feels like. Oddly, repressed anger doesn't look like the anger that many of us think about. Fist clenched, venom spewing. It's not like that at all. Some signs of repressed anger is that you never get angry, but you feel sad and depressed. Like I said, sarcasm is your form of communication, being uncomfortable with conflict and confrontation. Feeling the need to control everything in your life is a very big sign of repressed anger. Having difficulty setting boundaries and standing up for yourself, or even saying no, is a big sign of repressed anger. Shutting down, avoiding people, isolating yourself when you're upset, or even crying on a dime is really a big sign of repressed anger. Complaining and playing the victim are big signs. High levels of stress, anxiety, and fatigue. Feeling like you are never going to be able to make progress is generally one, because we tend to keep ourselves in small boxes. And feeling guilty, ashamed, or bad when you are angry is another big symptom and sign. A couple more to think about is if you're an overly passive person, you may be actually holding on to a lot of negative emotions that are keeping you prisoner deep inside of your mind. If you become easily agitated or irritated at even the smallest thing, you may actually be holding on to repressed anger. Or if you have addictive or compulsive behavior, like you're a workaholic or alcohol drug addiction, or anything that takes you out of your daily functioning life, could be connected to repressed anger. If you experience unexplained panic attacks, this also may be a big sign of repressed anger. Of course, all of these things are connected to so many other things too, which is why I say please work with a licensed professional. But knowing that maybe some of these things, if not all of these things, are happening will help you kind of identify that maybe there's something I need to look at, right? So let's talk about some common causes and triggers of repressed anger. Of course, there are many, but let's start with being rejected. Being rejected for expressing your anger or your upset in the past can make you repress your anger, can make you hold yourself accountable for your feelings, and not allow yourself to express what you need to. So if you get into an environment where you can't say what you need to say, you may find yourself triggered in your past repressed anger. Having perfectionist tendencies and not being able to complete what you want to as perfect as you want to may trigger some of that repressed anger to come up. Struggling with your mental health, because we all have times where we do so, and that can bring the repressed anger to the forefront. Experiencing chronic trauma, so something that happens over and over and over again, like abuse, can cause that repressed anger to be triggered and come up. Having a position of authority that requires you to be a neutral personality or a neutral party can actually make everything that you've shoved off to the side come up because you're having to hold your tongue. I know I have experienced that personally. I know a lot of people have. And it's something that happens gradually, and it also can happen quickly without even realizing what the problem is. Even having high levels of shame or guilt can bring that repressed anger to the front. Or if you're struggling with impulse control or emotional regulation, can also very much re-trigger or bring things to the forefront. So let's talk about some very simple, quick ways to deal with the repressed anger. And the first one is to get quiet. I say this over and over again. Anytime that we're talking about an emotion, I tell you to calm the waters, calm the thoughts, calm everything down, because you have to understand where it's coming from. Where is the anger coming from? It's important to track the anger. How is it showing up? How is it coming up in your body? Take note of signs of fatigue or chest tightness or headaches or your hands tingling, or maybe you're having heart palpitations or you've got an upset stomach. Track how that anger is showing up for you and how it's causing you to feel. How do I feel right now? And then get yourself into a position to take your pen to paper or your voice to recording, some way that you can begin to tune in to your thoughts and your feelings and begin to process them outward. Anything that stays within the psyche, within the subconscious and conscious mind, stays within us. And if we do not process it out, guess what? We're going to have moments where it comes back up. So it's important that you get it out. Putting it on a piece of paper is so important because you can actually read what is in your thought process, as long as you do not judge it and you actually are very genuine and vulnerable about what you put on the paper, what you allow yourself to bring forward. And then I want you to identify and interrupt any angry thoughts. Why is it there? Where did it come from? And what is it trying to point you to? This is a very important question. What are you trying to show me? What is it that needs to be resolved? If I have this angry thought, I am so pissed off because this happened, I need to look at why. Why am I so mad? How do I feel about this moment? Was it an injustice to me? And if so, how can I find resolution? In episode 320 of the podcast, What to Do When Someone Hurts You, I walk you through the way to process really hard, hurtful moments. And maybe you need to go through those steps in order to not be in a triggered state or to not hold on to this anger and deep-seated upset. And I want you to also practice mindfulness. How can I take care of myself? How can I listen to my thoughts? How can I take care of my mind? Use I statements and take ownership of the anger itself. What is your responsibility? I statements feel and sound like I feel upset because I did this and this occurred. Taking that helps you diffuse the blame and gets into a place of actual action and ownership. How can you look at this experience, take ownership of what is yours, process it, track the anger part of it, get it out, and decide what you're going to do with it? And that's the next piece. What am I going to do with this? Is this what I want to hold on to? I want you to hear this statement. And if you take nothing else, allow it to be this. The emotion that lasts the longest is the emotion that drives everything. What do I mean? If anger is the emotion that's lasting the longest for me, every action, thought, and feeling that I have after that impact is made through anger. If the emotion that lasts the longest is happiness, the next actions, thoughts, and feelings that I take are going to be driven through happiness. The emotion that lasts the longest is the emotion that drives everything. How do I want to feel? Important to know, important to act from. And then give yourself a plan. What am I going to do to process this anger? How am I going to look at these little traumas or these experiences that I've pushed down and work on them? What am I going to do? I'm going to talk about doing the work in just a second. And then commit to the plan. Don't spend all this time trying to process and do I statements and feel your way through the anger and the experiences and then just go, well, whatever. It's not going to provide you any yields, any change, any good results. So what do you need to do? And then do it. Now let's quickly talk about what doing the work looks like so that you have a healthy setup in doing this anger repression work. Again, do it with a therapist. Do it with somebody trauma trained. But if you can't, that's understandable. Do these processes and then come to this experience where you know what doing the work actually feels and looks like. So one, it's setting and maintaining a healthy boundary with the self and the people that hurt you, or the experience that hurt you, or the feeling that keeps coming up. You can set boundaries with feelings. I'm going to process at this time and not during this other time. Simply creating a boundary for the self. Then becoming aware of the energy the situation brings to you and the energy that you bring to the situation. How is what you're processing changing the way that you show up? And how are you showing up? Doing the work is, well, it's work, right? It takes action. It takes accountability. It takes movement. So being aware of what you bring to the table and what you're taking away. Understanding the coping mechanisms that you need and putting those into place. Doing the work means that you're actually serving yourself, not doing the things that don't serve you. So what are your coping mechanisms? What's in your toolbox that's going to allow you to process correctly? Everything on this podcast that I talk about and do is essentially a tool. So what do you need and can you find their tools? There's over 300 episodes here. I'm sure that you can find a single tool, right? Or again, work with a therapist. Notice the patterns of behaviors, responsibilities, and validate those in a healthy way. That is part of doing the work. Watching your reactions and actions are major parts of doing the work because you're taking time to evaluate your why and then responding correctly, accordingly, right? We're not just jumping. We're not allowing the anger to fling us off on the path into reaction mode, but instead we're taking time to evaluate why, whose responsibility is this, and how am I going to connect to it? And I've said this word multiple times, but it comes back to accountability. Allowing your anger or a situation to rip you apart inside, mentally and emotionally, is a way of defining yourself. Is that what you want to do? You have to be accountable when doing the work and realizing that just because something happened doesn't mean that it's a life sentence. You have to be accountable for your feelings, for your thoughts, for the way that you are connecting. And you have to learn to care for the self. You have to stop. You have to work on allowing yourself to be flexible, carving out time, listening to the self and to others when necessary, practicing patience and self-care, self-love, knowing that every time you experience something, It can be a difficult inner conversation, but instead of really hurting yourself and keeping yourself in a cycle of drama, you do have the ability to step out of it and say, just because this happened doesn't mean that it has to carry me for the rest of my life. Think of it that way. Just because something happened doesn't mean that it has to carry me for the rest of my life. Again, this is a very quick hit of looking at repressed anger. I encourage anyone who identifies with what I have just delivered here to find someone who can help you, whether that's me or someone else. Know that there are people out there who can help you process this in a much quicker, much more grounded and centered way. And I want to thank you for the question that came in. It was done so asking for names to be left off. And that's always a privilege of mine to be able to answer your questions. So please submit them to getyourlifetogethergirl@gmail.com. And I'm happy to answer them here on this Mindset Reset. Thank you so much for listening to the Get Your Life Together Girl mini Mindset Reset. If you have a subject or a strategy request, email us at getyourlifetogethergirl@gmail.com. Or you can visit our website at getyourlifetogethergirl.com. If you're looking for daily inspiration or tips and tools, join the growing community at Get Your Life Together Girl on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thank you for being a valuable member of this community. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others.